What happens when international cartels try to outsmart America's southern border by turning Florida's coastline into their new highway? In August 2025, federal agents and local sheriffs uncovered a smuggling pipeline unlike anything the state had seen before. Backed by cartel resources, the network moved narcotics and human cargo directly from the Bahamas into U.S. waters with professional precision. It wasn't just small-time crime, it was global coordination, counter-surveillance, and calculated risks. But law enforcement struck first. Can teamwork between agencies truly dismantle such complex international operations before they expand further? Hi, before we continue, your one click on the subscribe button fuels all the effort behind this and every future video. The operation began quietly, long before the public even knew something was unfolding. Federal investigators, supported by local partners, had picked up intelligence of suspicious activity involving a group of men renting an Airbnb in Fort Pierce, Florida. To neighbors, the house appeared like any other vacation rental, but to trained eyes, the movement suggested organization, planning, and preparation for something larger. Inside, investigators later learned, the entire smuggling mission was being coordinated. Routes were mapped, boats were assigned, and counter-surveillance teams were placed on nearby beaches to monitor law enforcement presence. At dawn, the stage was set. Around 5:30 a.m., 3 boats departed from the Fort Pierce Inlet, all between 33 and 42 feet long. These were not fishing vessels or pleasure crafts. They were built for speed and loaded with people and narcotics. Law enforcement had already positioned themselves for interception.
So with help from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Air and Marine Operations, Homeland Security, Florida Fish and Wildlife, and the Florida Highway Patrol, they set their plans in motion.
The FBI, DEA, Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, Florida Fish and Wildlife, and the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office all worked in unison, covering the water, air, and shoreline. Out of the darkness, the 3 vessels emerged. 2 complied immediately when law enforcement cut across their paths. The third attempted to escape. Its engines roared as the vessel surged forward, sending spray across the inlet. A chase lit up the water as federal agents pressed in pursuit. Within seconds, the fleeing boat was disabled and its crew taken into custody. Florida's calm shoreline had momentarily turned into a battlefield, but the response was swift, coordinated, and effective. The discoveries on board stunned even experienced agents. In total, 30 Chinese nationals, including 2 children and 5 Bahamian smugglers, were found across the boats. Alongside them were 370 pounds of cocaine, packaged and prepared for delivery.
We broke the news Monday that 4 migrant boats were intercepted off our coast this weekend.
On board, 30 Chinese nationals, including 2 children, 5 Bahamians, and 168 kilograms of cocaine.
The St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office uncovered what they say is a smuggling operation involving more than 30 people. Several law enforcement agencies worked together after learning a group of men was planning to travel to the Bahamas to pick up illegal drugs and, quote, smuggle undocumented immigrants into the U.S.
The numbers alone revealed the professional nature of the mission, but investigators also uncovered beach-based counter-surveillance teams that were tracking law enforcement movements. This was no small operation. It was a cartel-backed smuggling pipeline designed to bypass land border restrictions and funnel narcotics and migrants into the U.S. By the time the smoke cleared, 38 arrests had been made. Authorities described it as one of the most sophisticated maritime smuggling plots ever disrupted on U.S. soil. Officials emphasized that this was not an isolated attempt, but rather part of a much larger international conspiracy. Links were traced back to networks in the Bahamas and even further abroad, with indications of Chinese criminal organizations orchestrating logistics from overseas. The financial aspect underscored the magnitude of the scheme. Migrants were reported to have paid between $30,000 and $35,000 each for the journey. Cartels, already profiting from narcotic sales, were doubling their revenue by charging desperate individuals for the dangerous sea passage. Authorities noted that many of these migrants first entered the Bahamas legally, then relied on smugglers for the final stretch. The pipeline was designed with military-style precision to minimize risks and maximize profits. Investigators also highlighted the personal cost to the migrants. Among those detained were families and children who had sold property or borrowed from relatives. investing their entire savings in hopes of reaching the United States. Instead, they found themselves detained, facing deportation, or being sent back to countries where severe consequences awaited. For Chinese citizens in particular, returning home after illegal migration attempts could mean harsh penalties under strict laws, making their gamble even more perilous. From a law enforcement perspective, the takedown was an undeniable success. Sheriff Richard Del Toro of St. Lucie County underscored the importance of cooperation between local, state, and federal agencies. He made clear that his county would not serve as a gateway for criminal enterprises. Federal agencies echoed his sentiments. The DEA and FBI noted that this operation was not just about seizing drugs or arresting smugglers. It was about saving lives and protecting communities. The Coast Guard emphasized its continued commitment to working with partners to prevent dangerous voyages and safeguard American shores. National data confirmed a shift in cartel strategies. With stricter enforcement at the southern land border, traffickers increasingly turned to sea and air routes. U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported that while land-based narcotic seizures had dropped from 453 in July 2024 to 331 in July 2025, maritime and air seizures surged. By mid-2025, more than 800 maritime and air seizures had already been recorded, putting the year on pace to exceed all previous records. Experts warned that this trend would continue, driven by the high profits and adaptability of organized crime. For law enforcement, the challenge is constant adaptation. As smugglers build new strategies, agencies refine their responses. The Fort Pierce operation demonstrated the effectiveness of intelligence-led policing, surveillance, and interagency coordination. From the Airbnb surveillance to the water pursuit, every detail showcased careful planning and swift execution. Federal officials described the case as a message to cartels. No matter how sophisticated the smuggling attempt, U.S. agencies are ready to respond with greater precision. But beyond the immediate success, the operation revealed the human dimension. Migrants, often treated as commodities by traffickers, endured perilous journeys, only to end up in detention. Children were carried alongside narcotics, used as shields in criminal enterprises. This dual exploitation of both narcotics demand and human desperation highlights the cruel efficiency of smuggling networks. Law enforcement's intervention prevented not only the distribution of dangerous drugs, but also the potential loss of lives at sea. For Florida, the takedown carried special significance. The state does not share a land border with Mexico. Sheriff Del Toro confirmed that his department had increased marine patrols and strengthened ties with federal agencies to meet the threat. Federal representatives stressed that any attempt to enter the U.S. illegally by sea would result in interdiction and repatriation. The unified message was clear: Florida's waters are being watched, and law enforcement remains prepared. As the investigation continues, authorities remain alert to broader implications. This was not just a single smuggling attempt, but a glimpse into evolving cartel strategies. Officials acknowledge that profits for cartels remain high, but so too does the resolve of U.S. law enforcement. The Fort Pierce arrests demonstrated what can be achieved when agencies operate as one, reinforcing that America's borders, whether by land, sea, or air, are protected by vigilant and determined professionals. How can law enforcement agencies continue adapting to ever-changing cartel strategies while also protecting vulnerable migrants from exploitation?